1. I'd been married for 4 years, and my husband never touched me. Because the one he loved was my sister. He only married me to spite her. Now she's back in the States for medical treatment, and to save her, he personally cut out a piece of my liver. And somehow, he still blamed me for not being family-oriented. My biggest mistake was keeping a bunch of leeches like them around for so long. When I finally filed for divorce, that's when he started regretting everything. The moment the news broke that Bella had returned, I had already been sitting at the dinner table, waiting for Brian, for 3 hours. Today was Brian's birthday. Knowing he hated crowds, I decided to keep things simple, just the two of us at home. Worried he might be swamped at work, I asked him 2 days in advance if he could make time. He looked a little surprised then, but said he'd try to get off early. I was thrilled. For once, he wasn't so cold toward me. I knew there was someone else in his heart. That he only married me out of spite. But I loved him. I truly believed that one day, he'd let go of the past and try to build a real life with me. To celebrate his birthday, I even took the day off. I got up early and went to the local farmer's market to buy all his favorite ingredients. After we got married, I took cooking lessons just for him. But Brian was hardly ever home. Even when he was, he rarely touched the food I made. So today, I gave it everything I had. I made a huge spread. At 7 p.m., he still hadn't come home. I texted him, no response. I figured he was stuck at work. Being a doctor, long hours were normal. Now it was already 9 p.m. Still nothing. Worried, I called him. He hung up. Suddenly, a terrible feeling crept in. Then a push notification lit up my phone. I glanced down and saw Bella's name. My heart sank. I opened Twitter. The trending feed was filled with headlines: author Bella returns to the U.S. And photos, Brian and Bella, embracing at the airport. The photos were originally posted by a blogger. A beautiful woman and a handsome man, people were swooning over the aesthetics. Then someone recognized the woman, Bella, a painter who had studied abroad. The media picked it up from there. In the pictures, Brian was smiling at Bella so tenderly. I let out a bitter laugh. So this is the smile he'd been saving all these years, for her. In all the time we'd been married, not once had he looked at me that way. This audio is originally produced by the YouTube channel, Lovestory. Please credit when sharing. 2. I was woken by the sound of my phone ringing. Groggy, I opened my eyes and realized I had fallen asleep at the dining table. My arm was numb. Everything was still exactly as it had been the night before. My heart dropped. Brian hadn't come home. The phone kept ringing, loud and shrill. I glanced at the caller ID, pressed my lips together, and picked up. Took you long enough. Were you in a coma? My mother's voice came screeching through the line. I didn't answer. I knew silence was better, otherwise she'd have even nastier things to say. You hear me, you damn girl? She barked again, making me instinctively frown. What do you want? I already knew. Every time they called, it was never for anything but money. Did you know your sister's back in the States? She's in the hospital. Come over. And bring some proper health supplements. Don't act like some petty cheapskate. She kept rambling, but I stopped listening. Bella's in the hospital? But didn't she look just fine last night? I stared at the cold dishes still on the table. Then I dumped everything into the trash. I cleaned the kitchen in silence, and finally left. At the hospital, my mother started in on me right away. You walk like a snail. I told you to bring health supplements, and you show up with just a fruit basket. She snatched it from me, flipping through it in disgust. You've been working for years, and you haven't even saved a dime. Useless. You'll never compare to your sister. I stayed quiet. I'd heard this script my entire life. No matter what I did, how hard I worked, Bella was always the golden child. That's enough. You'll upset Bella if she hears this. My father finally cut her off and pulled her toward the inpatient wing. I trailed behind them, pressing a hand to my stomach. It was already upset. I'd rushed out without breakfast. They never asked if I'd eaten. They never asked anything that mattered. 3. Bella, we're here to see you. My mom beamed as she pushed open the door. I stood behind her, and the first thing I saw was Brian, arms around Bella. Our eyes met. The room fell into silence. Mom, Dad, Brian gently pulled away from Bella and greeted them. "Thank you, Brian, for staying with Bella last night," Mom said cheerfully, acting like it was totally normal. As if they weren't brother-in-law and sister-in-law. "You're too kind. It was the least I could do." "Daddy, Mommy," Bella called sweetly, holding out her arms like a child. The three of them embraced like one big happy family. I stayed by the doorway, pretending I hadn't seen a thing. Brian walked over and whispered, "Bella's just feeling fragile." I was comforting her. "Don't read too much into it." I turned to look at him but said nothing. His face slowly shifted from guilt to irritation. "I'm a doctor. Bella's a patient. It's just a normal doctor-patient interaction. Don't overthink it." I let out a dry laugh. A normal doctor-patient interaction? That intimate? That personal? I didn't say you were doing anything shady. Why are you getting so defensive? Dr. Brian, do you remember you're a married man? Is this how you usually communicate with your other patients too? If Brian had the guts to openly admit Bella was special to him, I could have handled it. After all, she was the one he loved and could never have. He only married me because of her. Because I was her sister. A convenient pawn to provoke her. But instead of being honest, he kept denying it with half-truths, like I was some fool, easily manipulated. Then Bella spoke, cutting through my thoughts. "But I'm afraid my sister wouldn't approve." She lowered her head, voice soft and pitiful. "What is she scheming now?" My mother's face darkened. "Don't worry, sweetie. I still run this family." 4. It didn't take long for me to figure out what they wanted. They expected me to pay for Bella's treatment. "Bella, you're still young, you'll get better. Just focus on recovering, okay? Ariana will figure out the money," Mom said gently, trying to comfort her. "Thank you, Mom. You're the best." Bella smiled sweetly and leaned into Mom's arms. It was the picture-perfect moment of mother-daughter affection. I let out a laugh. The three of them had been bleeding me dry for years. I won't even talk about my parents. They said our house was too old, wanted a new one, made me pay the down payment and cover the mortgage, and didn't even leave a room for me. Bella claimed to be a painter living abroad, but in truth, she was living it up on my dime. And now, they wanted me to pay for her treatment too? Did they really think I was some kind of cash cow, here for them to milk dry? I don't have the money. As soon as I said it, all four people in the room turned to look at me. I'm already paying off 2 mortgages, plus sending money to you guys every month. What more do you want? On top of paying for my parents' house, I also bought the home Brian and I live in. He knew that perfectly well. Then go get a loan, Mom said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You'd been working for years. You should qualify for a pretty big one. I gave a half smile. Isn't Bella a painter? Her artwork must be worth a lot. Why not sell a piece and use that for the hospital bills? Bella frowned, her tone soft. How could you say that, sis? My art is priceless. It's not something to be tainted by money. Oh, so she's above money, but still wants mine. Such a hypocrite. I'm not taking out a loan, I told Mom flatly. You ungrateful brat. She suddenly slapped me across the face and yanked my hair, screaming, "You heartless snake. Selfish. Ungrateful. Bella is your sister and you're just going to abandon her like this?" I grabbed her wrist and flung her hand away. My voice was ice. If you can't afford to raise a child, you shouldn't have had one. Bella is your daughter, not mine. If you want to save her, you pay for it. I won't give you a single cent. You're so cold-blooded, Ariana, Brian scolded, face tense. How could you lay hands on your mom? Apologize to her, now. Mom looked smug, like she'd just won some twisted game. Dad stayed silent in his chair, and Bella sat on the bed, staring at me with a mix of fake innocence and quiet challenge. I brushed my disheveled hair from my face. My cheek burned, I didn't need a mirror to know it was swollen. I glared at Brian coldly. I'm not apologizing. And I'm not paying. A flicker of guilt crossed Brian's face. This is all my fault. I never meant to drag you all into this, Bella sobbed, sliding off the bed dramatically and knocking over the four stand. Bella. Mom rushed over to her, arms outstretched. Brian and Dad followed behind. Brian lifted her back onto the bed while the three of them fussed over her, showering her with comfort. I turned and walked out. Some things were never meant to be mine, and forcing it wouldn't change a thing. 5. I lay on the bed, eyes blank, staring at the drifting clouds outside the window. Bella and I are fraternal twins. But from the moment we were born, our lives were nothing alike. The nurses said she was beautiful from the start. Next to her, I was just plain. Everyone around us praised Bella for her looks. When it came to me, all they ever said was, "She's a good kid." Bella was pretty, sweet-talking, always the center of attention. Whenever there were gifts, whether from our parents or relatives, Bella always got to choose first. I was left with whatever she didn't want. Once, I begged our parents to enroll me in an English tutoring class to help with school, but they said the money had to go toward Bella's dance lessons instead. I knew the only way I could change my fate was through hard work. So I studied relentlessly. I asked questions in class, spent weekends in the library. Eventually, I got into UC Berkeley. I thought that would be my turning point. I was wrong. My parents ripped up my acceptance letter right in front of me, saying college was too expensive and I should be realistic and get a job instead. Later, I found out it was Bella's idea. She cried to our parents that her grades weren't as good as mine, and the family would be embarrassed. She also told them that if I left for college out of state, I'd never look after them again. When they told me this, they were proud, like they'd done something clever. I felt ice in my veins. I remembered how Bella had come to comfort me after my letter was torn up. She whispered that once she started working, she'd save money and help me go back to school. I believed her. I took 2 jobs to support her through college. Just then, a cold compress was held in front of my face. I hadn't even noticed Brian had come in. "I brought you some liver porridge. Come on, eat something," he said, gently helping me sit up. I pressed the ice pack to my swollen cheek as he stirred the porridge for me. "It's cooled down now," he said, handing me the spoon. I took a few sips while he held the ice pack to my face. For the first time in forever, I felt cared for. Maybe Brian still had a shred of affection for me. I never liked the taste of liver, though. After a few bites, I put the spoon down. "What's wrong?" I shook my head. "I'm not hungry." Brian looked torn. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said, "Ariana, Bella has cirrhosis. She urgently needs a liver transplant. You're a match. Would you be willing to donate half of yours to her?" My head buzzed. I didn't know whether to ask why he tested me behind my back, or mock him for how far he'd go for Bella. "You must really be willing to crawl for her," I said, getting up to leave. He grabbed my arm. "Don't touch me." I picked up the food container and slammed it against his head. The porridge dripped down his face, thick and sticky. He looked pathetic. "Ariana, she's your sister. Are you seriously going to just let her die? Why should I save her? What about me? So just because she might die, I'm expected to give up my own life?" Oddly, I was calm now. "I won't let anything happen to you. I promise," Brian said firmly. I laughed coldly. "Oh, you promise? Dr. Brian, have you forgotten a person only has one liver? Even if I somehow survive, you think that comes without a cost?" He said nothing. I yanked my arm out of his grasp. "I'd rather die than give my liver to Bella. Keep dreaming." You're listening to Love Short Story, a YouTube channel dedicated to captivating short stories. Let's continue. 6. I was in the office, briefing my team about an upcoming client meeting when I heard yelling from the lobby. I turned my head and saw my parents pushing past the front desk receptionist. Mom was shouting as she barged in, "Don't touch me. If you lay a finger on me, I'll drop to the ground right now and sue you blind." The moment she saw me, her voice got even louder. "There she is. That ungrateful brat. Left home and cut off all ties. Her own sister's in the hospital, dying, and she doesn't even care. Cold-blooded and heartless. Where's her boss? Fire her immediately." I was beyond relieved I'd never told them I was a partner in the company. Otherwise, they'd have drained me dry like leeches. My coworkers exchanged awkward glances, watching the scene unfold. I just stood there, arms crossed, listening to them accuse me of abandoning my family, calling me a traitor to my blood. Then I picked up a calculator from a coworker's desk and slammed it to the floor. The room went dead silent. So just because I won't donate part of my liver to your precious daughter, you wish death on me now? I had long since given up any hope for them. You live in a house I bought, you've been spending my money while Bella was living it up abroad. And now that she's sick, you want me to pay again, and even give up my organ? Where do you get the audacity? I could see the shift in my coworkers' expressions. They finally understood. But Mom didn't seem the least bit ashamed. She jabbed her finger at me and screamed. I gave birth to you. You owe me obedience. And Bella is your sister, you should save her. I'm not donating. You rotten girl. She suddenly lunged at me and shoved me hard. I wasn't ready for it. My head slammed into the corner of a desk. Everything went black. When I came to, I felt numb all over. Every breath made my chest ache. I glanced down. I was wearing an oxygen mask, with tubes and wires hooked up to my body. Had I really been hurt that badly? A few feet away, two nurses were whispering. Has that Ariana patient woken up yet? One asked, her tone full of unease. My name? I stayed quiet and listened. Not yet, the other replied. But her vitals have stabilized. Dr. Bryan's assistant said he'll be by in half an hour. Oh God, the first nurse muttered. I still can't believe Dr. Bryan went ahead and removed her liver without consent. If this gets out, we're all screwed. My eyes flew open. What did she just say? Well, technically, he signed off as her medical guardian. So it's not illegal per se. I didn't catch the rest. My brain was spinning. With great effort, I raised my hand to touch my chest. There it was, a swollen surgical scar. Bryan had taken a piece of my liver, while I was unconscious. And given it to Bella. My arm dropped limply. A single tear slid down the side of my face. 7. The first time I met Bryan, I was delivering money to Bella. She had gotten into college as a dance major, but she couldn't handle the workload. Her grades were always near the bottom. Then she decided she wanted to switch to fine arts. Since she had no background in it, she needed private tutors. Which meant more money. Back then, she drained every cent I had. And still acted like it wasn't enough. I hadn't bought new clothes in 2 years trying to keep up with her expenses. But she thought I looked poor and embarrassing. She wouldn't even let me into her dorm, just told me to wait outside the school gate. That day, I handed over the cash. Bella looked annoyed, counted the bills, then smiled and stuffed the money into her brand new designer purse. Bryan happened to be passing by. He greeted Bella, and she begrudgingly introduced me as her sister. Unlike Bella's roommates, Bryan didn't look down on me. He even invited me to lunch. Bella had no choice but to bring me along. On the way, she sneered, "Try not to embarrass yourself. Don't act like some hillbilly hog who doesn't belong." Bryan asked what she wanted to eat, and Bella picked a fancy French place. I'd never been to a restaurant like that. The only thing I had going for me was decent English, but even that didn't stop the waiter from giving me dirty looks. It was my first time using a knife and fork. I was so nervous I made loud screeching sounds while cutting the meat. Bella mocked me, of course. Bryan came to my rescue. He even helped me cut the steak into bite-sized pieces. I thought he was different. Gentle. Kind. Not like the others who treated me like trash. Later, when I realized Bella was unreliable, I started saving money and studying on my own. I finally got into college and reconnected with Bryan. He treated me to ice cream to celebrate. It was the best ice cream I'd ever tasted. After Bella graduated and went overseas, Bryan fell into a slump. I stayed by his side, encouraging him. When I found out his research was in danger of being shut down due to funding, I ran around pulling strings to help him find sponsors. By the time I became a sales manager, he had made it as an attending physician. Then he proposed. I thought I had finally won his heart. I thought he had fallen for me. Turns out, I was just Bella's stand-in. And now, he nearly killed me for her. 8. 3 days later, I was transferred out of the ICU to a regular hospital room. In those 3 days, Brian never showed up. Neither did my parents. The moment my use was fulfilled, I was discarded like trash. One of the nurses, who had previously spoken up for me, told me Brian had been by Bella's bedside the entire time, hadn't slept in days. The first thing I did after getting my personal belongings was report an illegal organ removal. The police showed up quickly. So did Brian. I had just finished giving my statement when he stormed into the room, his face pale. "You've got it all wrong," he said to the officers. "I'm Ariana's legal guardian. I had every right to sign off on the surgery." My lips trembled as I spoke. "But I never agreed to donate my liver." Brian frowned at me. "Ariana, don't be like this. I know the surgery hurt, but don't lie like that." My parents came running in too, making a scene. They accused me of being spiteful, said I was making things up out of anger. "We're family," Brian told the officers. "Why would I hurt my own wife?" "Sorry for the trouble, officers, we'll withdraw the report." One of the cops looked at me. "Do you agree to drop the case?" Before I could say a word, my parents grabbed my hands, shaking them, begging me to retract it. I was in pain all over. I wanted to speak but couldn't get the words out. Then the female officer snapped. "Can't you see she's unwell? What's wrong with you people?" Embarrassed, my parents finally let go of me, then turned to plead with the male officer. The female cop leaned down and spoke gently. "Are you okay?" I shook my head. She suddenly pressed something into my palm. "When you're feeling better, if you need help, call me." Her gaze was steady and full of strength. My nose stung. A stranger had given me more comfort than my own family ever had. "Thank you," I rasped. My parents walked the officers out. Brian didn't leave. He stood by the bed and apologized, said he was sorry, that he'd make it up to me someday. I kept my eyes shut and didn't say a word. Crocodile tears. If I'd died on that table, he probably wouldn't have even blinked. 9. The company sent an assistant to take care of me at the hospital. Some colleagues had been with me the day the incident happened, but once I was rushed into surgery, they didn't know what happened afterward. When they found out a doctor had removed a piece of my liver without consent, my business partner was stunned. He told me to rest and promised he'd help me figure it out. But I've never been the type to sit back and do nothing. I asked the assistant to start gathering evidence while I was still in the hospital. Brian had violated medical protocols. The hospital wouldn't escape responsibility either. That's when Bella showed up. I was eating the nutritional meal my assistant had ordered. Bella glanced at the food, envy flashing across her face before she sneered. "Must be nice to have money. Though honestly, that food looks pretty average. Brian's been cooking soup for me himself." I kept eating, casually replying to work messages, pretending she didn't exist. But she just kept talking, going on and on about how great Brian was to her. The moment I told him I was coming back, Brian totally panicked. "He's always loved me. You were just born to live in my shadow." Her words dripped with spite. I looked up at her smug, taunting expression and set my phone down. "I hope you'll always feel confident enough to say things like that, no matter what happens." Bella's face twisted in anger. She stormed out. Not even half an hour later, Brian walked in. I frowned. I really needed to transfer hospitals, this place was too chaotic. As soon as Brian stepped in, he started laying into me. The liver transplant was my idea. Bella had nothing to do with it. Why would you say something like that to her? Don't you know how sensitive she is? Oh, so she can't be upset, but I can? Brian was just as spineless as ever. I stared at him coldly. "Let's get a divorce." He froze. "If you can't let go of your first love, then I'll make it easy for you. I'm tired of watching you waver between us. And honestly, I don't want to end up dead one day without even knowing why." Brian's expression turned livid. "Fine. Divorce it is. Don't come crying to me later." I let out a bitter laugh. The divorce process went surprisingly smoothly. Brian acted all high and mighty, saying he wouldn't fight me over assets. I couldn't believe he had the nerve to say that. He'd kept every cent of his paycheck for himself. I paid the bills, I bought the house. That home had nothing of his in it, except for himself. I told Brian he had one day to pack up and leave. I was changing the door code, and I didn't want him blaming me if anything went missing. Later, my assistant came back from helping change the code and told me the place had been turned upside down. Of course it was. Brian never lifted a finger around the house. I did everything. Strangely, the thought of no longer having to take care of anyone made me feel lighter than I'd felt in years. 10. The moment I could get out of bed, I started the process to transfer hospitals. When I went to settle the bill, I discovered something unbelievable. All of Bella's hospitalization fees had been withdrawn from my account. I laughed in disbelief. I immediately demanded the hospital issue a refund. Deducting money from my account without my consent? That was flat out illegal. The hospital said they'd have to report it to upper management first. I realized I needed to speed up the lawsuit. The next thing I did was cancel my sponsorship of Brian's research lab. Back when he was in grad school, he and his classmates had started a drug development project. But medical research is a money pit, they struggled with funding. Until I stepped in. When I started earning bonuses as a sales manager, I quietly began investing in his research. Thanks to that, they were finally able to move forward. And after I got promoted, they never lacked funding again. I'd been worried Brian might feel awkward if he knew the money came from me. So I never told him. But after what he did, risking someone else's life for Bella, he didn't deserve to call himself a doctor. Once I packed up my things, a nurse wheeled me toward the exit. As we passed one of the rooms, I heard Brian's voice. He was arguing with Bella. I told you, our research is at a critical stage. If the funding dries up now, we'll have to shut everything down. We're this close. Bella, why would you pull out now? This drug we're working on could even help you someday. Brian's voice was hoarse, tired. But Bella shouted back, even louder. What was I supposed to do? I'm in the hospital too. You think Ariana's gonna pay for me? I had to use my own money. What, should I just let the hospital kick me out? Brian sighed. I'll talk to the hospital and see if they'll lower your fees or give you some kind of discount. We'll submit reimbursement forms and cover the rest later. Just, don't cut the funding. That was all I needed to hear. So that's what he thought. Brian actually believed the lab sponsorship came from Bella. I didn't know where he got that idea, but he was in for a rude awakening. Bella had never spent a dime helping his research. I didn't go in and shatter his fantasy. I was more curious. Once Brian finds out the truth, will he still think so fondly of his precious first love? 11. Out of nowhere, I ended up trending online. Turns out my parents had gone to the media crying about how unfilial I was. They even brought in relatives from back home to gang up on me, blaming me for Bella's hospitalization. Nosy netizens started digging into my background. When they discovered I was a board member of a company, public opinion turned vicious. Rich but heartless. A spoiled daughter who refuses to support her own parents. The company began feeling the impact. My business partner, who also happens to be a good friend, asked me what I wanted to do. So, I held a live-streamed press conference under the company's name. Being in a position of power has its perks. At least I didn't have to stand in the sun pretending to cry. I could sit comfortably in an air-conditioned room and explain the truth. Ariana, are those people really your parents? A reporter jumped in as soon as we started. They claim you cut them off financially and kicked them out of your home. Is it true? I raised my hand to stop the questioning. First, I said calmly, I'd like to apologize to the public for allowing my personal affairs to take up social resources. Second, I'm here to make a statement, not to answer your questions. Then, I laid out the financial records. Years of bank transfers to my parents and Bella. Proof of paying off their mortgage. This doesn't even include the money I gave them when Bella was in college, her tuition, study abroad expenses, everything. When I was accepted into UC Berkeley, my parents ripped up the offer letter in front of me because they favored Bella. Gasps filled the room. Before anyone could ask more, I continued. College entrance exam scores can be verified. If anyone doubts me, they're welcome to check with Berkeley or my high school. The internet never forgets. People soon pulled up my SAT scores, and Bella's. Mine were stellar. Hers barely passed. The contrast spoke volumes. They wanted to destroy me. But they forgot, this isn't a world where the loudest victim wins. They left me no way out, so I stopped playing nice. I then played a recording, one from just a few days ago. My parents demanding $1 million over the phone, barking orders, and insulting me like I was a servant. The whole room went quiet. People were visibly uncomfortable. I've done everything I could as a daughter, I said. I bought them a house, sent them money every month, even supported their favorite child, and yet I'm still slandered like this. What exactly did I do wrong to deserve this? You didn't do anything wrong, a male reporter shouted. Thank you, I replied. I've paid back their parenting in full. So today, I'm publicly announcing that I'm severing all ties with my parents. After they retire, I'll provide financial support based on the legal minimum required by state law, nothing more. Beyond that, we are no longer family. If they want to challenge that, I'm ready to go to court. And for the record, they stormed into my company for Bella's sake. They shoved me so hard I passed out after hitting my head. While I was unconscious, they teamed up with my ex-husband, Dr. Brian of TK Medical Center, to illegally remove part of my liver. Even Bella's hospital expenses were deducted from my account without my consent. The press room erupted. How can something like this happen in a country governed by law? A surgery that major, without patient consent? I raised my voice over the murmuring. All the evidence I've provided, I am fully willing to accept any legal scrutiny. Thank you for your time. I stood up and left before anyone could ask questions. Just as I expected, the public turned against my family. The disciplinary board launched an investigation. Brian was immediately suspended pending review. 12. A few days later, Brian showed up. I wasn't expecting him. Are you moving? He asked, staring blankly past me. I turned around. Sure enough, the living room was filled with packed boxes. Although the scandal had cleared my name and the company was doing better than ever, my parents still wouldn't quit. They came to the office twice, causing a huge scene. This time, my business partner didn't hold back. He called the police and reported them for illegal trespassing, claimed they might be spies from a rival firm. Especially since they had once assaulted me, he didn't want to take chances. My parents called afterward to curse me out. Said I was heartless, that as their daughter, I had to obey them. Then they changed their tune and begged me to talk to my partner, to settle privately. They didn't want to end up in jail. Of course, I refused. To avoid further trouble, I sold my shares in the company to my partner at a low price. When he asked what I planned to do next, I said, I'm retiring. I'd made enough money over the years to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Plus, I had investments that brought in steady returns. Still, I promised him that if he ever truly needed help, I wouldn't turn my back. He was one of the few real friends I had. I didn't believe Brian was there out of concern for me. So, this is what you came to talk about? I asked, mocking him. Brian looked down. I'm sorry. I didn't know they would go that far. I was speechless. Did he think one apology would magically fix everything? Then he said, slowly, I didn't know what kind of life you had at home. I thought, you and Bella were sisters, so it couldn't be that different. I shook my head. He had seen the difference. He just didn't care. Since our wedding, Brian had barely visited my family with me. My parents liked to keep up appearances around him, but the few times I did ask him to come along, he always said he was too busy. Bella's illness is really serious, he said, voice soft. I'm a doctor. I can't just stand by and watch someone die. I thought, since you and Bella are sisters, you'd be willing to save her. His eyes were full of warmth. Hope. But not an ounce of remorse. Something inside me snapped. What gives you the right to decide for me? What makes you think you're entitled to my body, just because you're my husband? I stared at him, expression sharp. You were my husband in name only. You never fulfilled the role, not for one single day. You used what I gave you to buy favors. Endangered my life without my consent. And now you want to talk about morals? What kind of doctor are you, Brian? He walked away, completely broken. 13. It wasn't until a week later that Brian called me again. "Ariana, I'm sorry." That was the first thing he said. At some point, his standard greeting had become an apology. "She lied to me. Bella lied to me all along." His voice trembled, thick with emotion. And just like that, I understood why he was calling. Bella had pretended to be my anonymous sponsor, tricking Brian into thinking she had been funding his research. That's why he felt so indebted to her, so much so that he violated medical ethics and secretly removed a piece of my liver. There was no way I was going to let that go. I not only handed Brian all the evidence of Bella's deception, but I also gave him photos of the extravagant life she'd been living abroad. Back then, she had refused to date him because he wasn't rich. She went overseas chasing a billionaire's son, but his family never saw her as worthy. She was just a temporary fling. After getting a taste of luxury, she couldn't stand the idea of working hard anymore. She went from one guy to the next, each one willing to spend money on her. But as she got older, even the wealthy playboys lost interest. So she settled for men with decent conditions who were at least willing to pay for her lifestyle. I wasn't interested in what Brian thought of her anymore. I exposed her for revenge, not because I cared about the outcome. I never expected him to call me. "I didn't know you were my sponsor. It was you supporting me all those years, and I hurt you. I was such a fool. I've been stripped of my medical license. The hospital fired me. Ariana, please. Just give me one more chance, I want to make things right." At that moment, my boarding gate announcement came over the airport speakers. "Where are you, Ariana?" Brian asked, desperation in his voice, drowned in background noise. "Brian, let's never see each other again in this life." I ended the call, grabbed my suitcase, and walked toward the gate. There was nothing left for me in that city. I just wanted to start over somewhere quiet, somewhere far away. 14. I walked through the alley, nodding to the neighbors I passed. Outside one house, Aunt Ava stepped out and handed me a bag of oranges. "Thank you, Aunt Ava." Her face crinkled into a big smile. 5 years ago, when I first arrived in this small town, I saw Aunt Ava slip and fall into a roadside ditch. I jumped in and pulled her out. When she found out I didn't have a place to stay, she and her family insisted I move in with them. Every day when they cooked soup for her, they made a portion for me too. Over time, I realized the people in this town were simple and sincere. There was no scheming, no manipulation. So I decided to stay. And just like that, 5 years passed. Maybe it was the fresh air and peace, but my health recovered well too. More oranges from Aunt Ava, huh? Man, she's totally biased. She won't even give me one, but gives you the whole bag. A familiar voice teased as a young man snatched the bag from my hand. That was Chris, our mayor's son. Top of the county when he got into college. Everyone thought he'd build a career in the city, but instead, he moved back here saying he wanted to revive rural communities. His dad nearly had a heart attack. I hadn't paid much attention to him at first. But then I saw how hard he worked, climbing mountains, crossing rivers, downing drinks with investors until he was vomiting and crying on the roadside. He looked so pitiful I asked to see his development proposal. After reviewing and revising it, I reached out to a few investors and got their approval. Now the town was thriving with a dual model, fruit orchards on one side, handcrafted goods and ecotourism on the other, all without disrupting the lives of longtime residents. Chris treated me like a mentor. He came to discuss every idea with me, and somehow always found me, no matter where I was. I couldn't avoid him even if I tried. One day, he brought me flowers and said he wanted to date me. I laughed it off, he was 5 years younger than me. But before long, villagers started singing his praises whenever I walked by. The mayor's daughter-in-law even said in front of me, "If you marry Chris, you'll be running this whole household." I was caught between embarrassment and annoyance. How many people had Chris told? Then the very next day, Chris made a public announcement over the town speaker system. "Dear uncles and aunties of the town, me pursuing Ariana is a personal matter. Please don't pressure her. You'll scare her away and I'll end up a lonely bachelor." After that, people still teased us with knowing looks. But no one pushed me anymore. Chris never pressured me either. We just continued getting along like always. Gradually, I got used to having him by my side. As we walked together toward my place, we saw someone standing at the door. Chris instinctively stepped in front of me. I stared at the back of that figure in disbelief. As if sensing me, the man turned around. It was Brian. Wearing an ill-fitting hiking jacket, his face was gaunt, streaked with silver strands in his hair. For a moment, it felt like a lifetime had passed. Brian lit up when he saw me. "Ariana. I finally found you." "Who is he?" Chris asked, eyes sharp with suspicion. "My ex-husband," I said calmly. Chris's eyes narrowed with disdain, but his shoulders relaxed. "So you're the ex. I've heard all about you." "I'm Chris, Ariana's boyfriend." His smile didn't reach his eyes as he extended his hand. Brian ignored him. He looked at me, desperate. "Is that true? Are you really dating someone?" His reaction puzzled me. "We've been divorced for years. Me having a boyfriend isn't your concern anymore. But I've been looking for you for 5 years." Tears streamed down Brian's face. "I know I messed up. I just want your forgiveness. That's all I've ever wanted." Chris scoffed. "You ruined her health with your selfishness, and now you want forgiveness to feel better about yourself? You're disgusting." I had once told Chris everything, thinking it might drive him away. Even though I looked healthy now, I still only had half a liver. Who knows what might happen down the line? But Chris had just held me tight and cursed out Brian and my family on my behalf. He swore that as long as he was around, no one would ever hurt me again. These days, Chris had more clout in this town than even his dad. One call from him and over a dozen young men showed up and dragged Brian away. "You go inside and rest," Chris said, pushing me gently toward the door. "I'll take care of the rest." From a distance, I could hear his cheerful voice ring out. "All right, boys, toss him out of town. BBQ's on me tonight. And if you ever see this guy around again, chuck him out and I'll cover everyone's late-night snacks." I laughed out loud. It felt good to finally have someone in my corner. 15. Chris burst into the courtyard holding his phone. "Ariana, look at this," he said, handing it to me. It was a news clip, featuring my family. In the video, my parents were sitting on the ground, crying dramatically in front of the cameras. But this time, the unfilial daughter they were accusing wasn't me, it was Bella. 5 years ago, Brian had saved Bella's life by transplanting my liver. Later, she pushed my parents to slander me online. After I cut ties with them and stopped sending money, their lives went downhill fast. Before I left the city, I'd already seen rumors online. Some distant relatives had tried to play matchmaker between Bella and Brian. Every time Brian showed up at the hospital, the whole family rallied around. But once Brian got fired, they immediately turned on him. With no help from him anymore, the hospital demanded payment. They couldn't afford it, and they were kicked out. Bella never held a real job. After discharge, she stayed home mooching off our parents. At first, they still supported her, hoping she'd either make money or marry rich to turn the family's fortunes around. But Bella spent money like water. Neither of my parents had worked in years. It didn't take long for them to blow through everything. At one point, they even tried to sell Bella's paintings. No one would buy them, not even for free. That's when they realized Bella had been lying to them all along. Neighbors reported loud arguments and the sound of plates smashing. Not long after, my parents were kicked out of the house. Bella had secretly mortgaged it to a loan shark and ran off with the money. Left with nothing, my parents had to rent a cheap place and survive doing odd jobs. Recently, Bella came crawling back, her liver condition had relapsed. She begged them for another liver transplant. Of course, they said no. They still wanted to live. So Bella brought in the media, filming herself kneeling outside their door every day, using public pressure to guilt them. But my mother wouldn't be manipulated like that. She fought back on camera. They screamed at each other. Mom accused Bella of making them homeless. Bella said they'd treated her like a cash machine. In a bid for sympathy, Bella even brought me up. She told the media our parents had mistreated me since I was a child. Sensing public sentiment shift, my mother flipped the script and claimed they only treated me that way because Bella had manipulated them. They argued like that for nearly half a year. Until Bella's condition rapidly worsened, and she died. But my parents' misery didn't end there. Thanks to all of Bella's drama, their past was dug up again. The biased, cruel parents who nearly destroyed their younger daughter. Even landlords didn't want to rent to them anymore. Homeless again, they turned to the media, crying and begging them to help find me. They said they realized their mistakes and pleaded for me to come see them. Some reporters even tried to defend them. Said there's no such thing as bad parents. That I should let the past go and make peace. But the internet wasn't having it. People tore into them in the comments. I smiled as I scrolled past. Didn't care one bit. Chris, watching my reaction, breathed a sigh of relief. I actually found the whole thing a bit funny. Just then, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I got it, Chris said, reaching for the phone. He took the call, then turned back to me, covering the mic with his hand and looking confused. It's the hospital. They say Brian's dying. He wants to see you one last time. The caller was one of Brian's former colleagues. He said Brian had been acting erratically lately, obsessively researching treatments for liver disease. He had no money, so he begged everyone for sponsorships. Eventually, he drank himself into gastric bleeding. With no test subjects, he began experimenting on himself. Now his organs were failing, fast. He didn't have much time left. And his dying wish was to see me. I shook my head. Just tell them I'm not feeling well. I can't leave the house. Chris quickly spat on the ground. Bad luck, don't jinx yourself. You're gonna live a long, healthy life. He shot me a sharp look, then turned back to the phone and declined the request. I leaned back on the recliner, eyes turned skyward. White clouds floated lazily above. Brian had thrown me into hell with his own hands. There was no forgiveness for that. Better to forget each other. And never meet again in the next life. This story is exclusively produced by the YouTube channel, Love Short Story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe.